The British, who had not given much thought to the heterogeneous character of the Nigerian peoples in formulating the administrative arrangements, had been compelled to divide the protectorate of southern Nigeria into two for administrative purposes because it was becoming more and more enlightened and articulate. In the main, language lay at the root of racial differences. Be they differences in culture and custom, in philosophy of life and political institutions, in national characteristics and social concepts and practices. I referred to some of the writings of Dr. Azikiwe from which it appeared that he would abolish the institution of obaship and chieftaincy if he had the power. And if you think it ended with Zik, you are mistaken. I played you an audio from 2023 during the electioneering campaign, where folks from the south were saying, we will remove the obas. I referred to some of the writings of Dr. Azikiwe from which it appeared that he would abolish the institution of obaship and chieftaincy if he had the power. Whilst such a proposition might be acceptable to his followers in and from the East, you know what? Let me pause for a second. Let me read something to you from Azikiwe's own book. I mean, this was not the one that Papa was referring to. It's just something along those lines. This is from my Odyssey, page 225. It says, I counsel them that the idea of aristocracy of birth was becoming obsolete, antique, antediluvian, and unworthy of practice by rational humanity. I added that I was sorry that tribalism still existed in West Africa, and that it was a pity that only the Igbo-speaking people saw fit to welcome me publicly. In other words, the entire nation should have come to welcome him because he's the king of everybody. Although I must admit that I was welcomed privately by different sections of the Lagos community. So the point I'm trying to make is where he said the idea of aristocracy of birth was becoming obsolete, antique, antediluvian, and unworthy of practice. This book was written in 1970, so I'm just telling you of the consistency of thought in that direction. The idea of aristocracy, royalty, all those things didn't matter to him. But why would that not matter to him? He's not a human being. It should matter to him. No, it doesn't matter to him, or it didn't matter to him because he had no cultural reference, no cultural frame of reference, or no frame of reference in his own culture on that particular matter. Let's read a bit more. I referred to some of the writings of Dr. Azikiwe from which it appeared that he would abolish the institution of obaship and chieftaincy if he had the power. Whilst such a proposition might be acceptable to his followers in and from the eastern region, where the British had experimented with varying degrees of success and failure with warren chiefs, it would not do for the western provinces and the northern provinces, where traditional chiefships had been established from time immemorial. In other words, the Igbos had no kings. There is a new movement online right now telling you that they had something some time ago, it was a lie. There's a saying by the Igbos themselves that they had no kings. This is not about whether it was good or bad, it's just about the reality of the culture. Okay, so it's not it's good, it's bad, that's not the point. The point is that because they didn't have that, they see no sense in that. I'm not saying they saw no sense, I'm saying they still see no sense in that. Even with all these Igbo things that are going all over the place, when they move into other people's spaces, they are wondering why you're doing like this. Because, last month, after the Super Falcons won, the ladies went to greet the president, curtsying, kneeling down, and some people took offense because, as far as they're concerned, that's demeaning. Again, it's not cultural to them. The stupidity of that talk, though, is that nobody is forcing them to do it. Again, there's nothing wrong in the fact that they don't do it in their culture. The stupidity of the action is condemning those who do it, which is where the arrogance and just this nonsense comes in. Because you don't do it, that's okay. Maybe in your culture you don't care about respect, that's fine. Those who care about it, let them do it without you. The reason is that whenever they see people do something that is strange, it makes them feel little. I'm talking about certain people. I'm not mentioning any group. You can fill in the gap if it's true. If it's not true, don't put anybody's name there that's not true. You don't do something in your culture, another person does it. You look at it and you wish that was you. And so because you cannot be that thing, you then denigrate it. And the Yorubas amongst them who now want to pander to them and say, you have a point. He has no point. He's talking arrant nonsense. It's like me going to the north, for instance, and seeing people, squatting to greet each other. What's my business with that? If I live amongst them, I will squat. Why? I'm in their land. It's just common sense. I don't go around saying, why must you squat? Are you begging for something? Why are you doing this? Why must you squat? We all have the same head. Nobody cares. It's their land. So the point is that because people have different cultural frames of reference, what they produce in terms of politics, in terms of ideology, will definitely be different. That is why, even in 2025, the only group that could muster the courage of coming up with a ridiculous indigency bill in Nigeria is folks from the Southeast that will grant people indigenous status after living there for 10 years. No other group would have thought of that. Because we have different frames of reference. And the crazy part is that for a group who really wants to exercise that all over the country, I would have loved it if they had done it for their own ethnic group within themselves first. Can an Ebonyi man become an Anambra man after staying there for 10 years? Let's start with your group. Is it the same place where a person's building is torn down because it's not from that place? Because it's considered, I'm not mentioning the state, it's considered to be of inferior quality. They are the same ethnic group, but that one is inferior in quality and identity. So they put on their building. So, anyway, the point is that people come up with things based on their cultural references. Let's go on. Or cultural frames of reference. All right. So I was talking about the fact that we had Obas in the west. There were emirs in the north, but in the east there were no kings, and so the Oyinbo tried with warrant chiefs. They succeeded in some areas, they failed in some areas. So he says here, the implicit and unshaken loyalty which the Igbos had shown to Dr. Azikiwe during the Ikoli Akisoya crisis did not arise, in my view, from ideological faith, but rather from linguistic affinity and ethnic self-assertion. This, I warned, was an ominous pointer to the future. Nigeria under a unitary constitution might be dominated by those, whatever their number, who hold greater allegiance to ethnic affinity than to principles and ideals. He's right. Our law is right. The situation in the north, I also pointed out, was in no way reassuring. The powers that be appeared determined to administer the north in isolation from the south, and at all events to prevent northerners from being contaminated politically by educated southerners. Southerners who had made efforts to start a newspaper in the north were unsuccessful. Educated northerners who had visited the south had done so under the close supervision of white officials. No northerner was allowed to take part in politics, and southerners resident in the north were obliged to confine their political activities to the area set aside for the abode of strangers. That's in Sabonkeri. Above all, the average enlightened northerner looked down on the southerners as Kafirs, unbelievers. As between various ethnic groups, I argued, there were differing standards of civilization as well as uneven stages in the adoption of Western education and the emulation of Western civilization. I'm going to read that again slowly. As between the various ethnic groups, I argued, there were differing standards of civilization. It is not all cultures in Nigeria that are at the same level of development. It is a fact. What I just said right now is a fact. Factual fact. We are different levels of evolution as different peoples. Now say it again. Where some people left 1,000 years ago, people are just trying to crawl into it in 2025. It's a fact. Therefore, you cannot rule us the same way. A person loses election, insults everybody's father. He's doing it because of his cultural evolution. A unitary constitution with only one central government would only result in frustration to the more pushful and more dynamic ethnic groups. Whereas the division of the country into regions along ethnic lines, I was saying something earlier I did not finish. A lot of us who talk about regionalism have to remember this point. The point is not just to have states, it's to have it based on ethnic groups, whereas the division of the country into regions along ethnic lines would enable each linguistic group not only to develop its own peculiar culture and institutions, but to move forward at its own pace without being unnecessarily pushed or unknowingly slowed down by others. What is he saying here? Nigeria is a country of nations. Why not have a structure that recognizes that and allows people to actually move according to how they should be? A unitary constitution with only one central government would only result in frustration to the more pushful and more dynamic ethnic groups, whereas the division of the country into regions along ethnic lines would enable each linguistic group not only to develop its own peculiar culture and institutions, but to move forward at its own pace without being unnecessarily pushed or unknowingly slowed down by the others. What this means basically is this. Again, there are many examples, but I can assure you. Now, you can go to mention because that one, Adam colonized us back. I'll tell you something interesting. In the UK, what I was saying here is what every other person does but black people. I don't know what they then take to us. The UK is divided into countries. I've said it before, let me say it again. Go online right now. Google how many countries, or you can say how many nations are in the United Kingdom. Use those two words, either of the words or both. How many countries or how many nations are in the UK? You see 4. It's 4. England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. There are 4 nations. That's the word. Nations, not tribe. There are 4 nations in the UK. Do you see anybody from Liverpool telling somebody from Aberdeen that they are divisive by being Scottish? The idea of ethnic states, I believe that it reduces the need, it will reduce the need for secession. In other words, you have nations, the only thing is that they don't have sovereignty. For instance, there's no Scottish state, but there's a Scottish nation. There's no Welsh state, but there's a Welsh nation. There's no English state safe, but there's an English nation. There's no Northern Irish state, but there's not. The only Irish state you have is the island that has Dublin as its capital. Northern Ireland is not a sovereign space. It's not a state, but it's a nation. What makes you a nation? Same ancestry, language, culture, history. That's what makes you a nation. That's why I always tell people that say Yoruba nation, Yoruba nation. Yoruba is a nation. Yoruba is not going to become a nation. And like I always tell people, if it is not a nation right now, it will never become a nation. In other words, if it is not a nation in terms of understanding of what a nation really is, it will not become a sovereign state that you think is what defines what a nation really is. So when we're talking, somebody comes and writes funny things in the comment section. The question is that, do you not understand the fact that what makes the place that you call Sena climbs work is the fact that they have structures that understand the nature of man. You have structure that is treating you like you're robots, expecting you to unite when there is no basis for it, because unity in Nigeria should be based on purpose, not based on identity, which is what you see in the UK, which is what you see in Belgium, which is what you see in Switzerland. It's what you see everywhere in the world. May God have mercy on Africa.